curriculum. See? Don't worry about math and science and all of that first. Worry about giving them the right attitude and mind to achieve the curriculum that you have for them.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is indeed the exalted Christ and the eternal leader of the nation of Islam. I thank Allah and can never thank him enough for leaving with us a reminder, leader, teaching guide in the Honorable Mr. Louis Farrakhan. Once again, assalamu alaikum and welcome to the 5th episode of a new educational paradigm. Today I have once again my brother, soon to be, you see how I almost said it, right? Soon to be Dr. Frederick Douglass Dixon, but he's still our brother, Brother Fred. And God willing, we'll have Brother Imam Sultan Rahman joining us as well shortly. Today, our focus is going to be with the spiritual development, but and I'm going to go ahead and read from the ministries, which you can find at justiceorelse.com. I think it's justiceorelse.com. I'll make sure I have the correct one before we leave out. And then there's a link called ministries, and under that, one of the ministries is spiritual development. Now I'll go ahead and read that real quick. It says, spiritual development. This ministry bears responsibility for assisting the individual members of the community in the process of heeding truth and right guidance. Respect, honor, and obedience to authority of the Creator in all aspects of life are essential to peace, harmony, freedom, justice, and equality. In the words of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, self-development is an absolutely essential component of this microcosm of the new world. It is not enough that we grow horizontally through the acquisition of farms, factories, banks, industry, trade, commerce, money, and good homes. Horizontal growth alone is death. All dead things are on a horizontal level. Therefore, we must grow vertically, grow in uprightness, or we will be overcome by our horizontal growth. The foundation of this ministry are study and training units, designed on the guidance of Allah, God, to produce self-examination, self-analysis, self-correction, and to quicken in each of us the self-accusing spirit. For it is only when we are awakened morally that we have to face the self-accusing spirit that leads to our resurrection. This comes from the Self-Improvement Basis for Community Development lecture, which was given on December 12, 1986. This comes from actually the introduction letter. But that's, that point, and there's a lot in it as we reflect on what's going on in society. And that really brings us, the relevance on why we're doing this program. It, of course, is a response for those who are joining us for the first time. This is a response to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan to educators, but not just looking at educators as we may have in the past, but it's a response to educators to do something to produce a new educational paradigm so that we can equip our people with all of those things that are encompassed in this letter, and dealing with trade and commerce, dealing with agriculture. And what we see in many instances, and which is a result of what we see in the society, is that we're not producing those needs for our people. So it ends up putting us in a situation where we're not able to take care of ourselves and not able to do the things that we need to do for ourselves. So in that, I came up with the thought of really beginning to inspire us and encourage us to relook at education, and starting with those 3 questions that we ask on each show. What is the purpose of education? Because in that, many of the things that we may have saw education as being is clearly not able to do that today. Many of you may have been told that you should go to school and you work hard, and if you get enough education, then you can get a good job. But we can see right now that that is not a reality. There's people who are graduating at the top of their class. There's people who are graduating with master's degrees and PhDs, and they're still not finding jobs. They're still not able to take care of themselves. Then if they're not unemployed, in many instances, our people are being underemployed, right? So in that next question that we go into is, what should we Black people expect education to do for our people? Is that we have to have and take on for ourselves, what do we see this system, the current system or the system that we know we have to build, what do we think it should be doing for us? What are the expectations that we should place on an educational system? If the one that we have right now is not working, then that means that we have to develop and create a new one. And what would our expectations be from that? And the last question is really important, not that the other two aren't, is that sometimes we spend a lot of time talking and philosophizing, and we can come up with lists and lists of problems, but at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we don't just point to problems, but we begin to identify and establish and implement solutions. So that last question is, what should be included in the curriculum to fulfill whatever in that previous question you said, to fulfill those expectations? So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead before we have our other guests join us and just kind of push Brother Fred to kind of, you know, as you reflect on the previous shows, I know you've seen them all, some of them you end up being a viewer instead of a co-host. But you've been with me in this project from the beginning. Just want to kind of, if you can go ahead and share some of your thoughts on where we've gone at this point and kind of where you see us going from now.
Well, what I appreciate most is the thought of a new educational paradigm, which is the most vital portion of what it is that we have attempted to put forth since you came up with this concept, Brother Troy. So I think when we think about the future, if we are to set the future straight, then we have to make sure that we've mastered our past for those potholes and those impediments, so that we can master those and not run into them and do the exact same thing that we've done prior. So a wise man once said, and I think it's very apropos for where we are right now over our consecutive weeks and consecutive months, he said that in a system of oppression, an educator is either a revolutionary or an oppressor. So as we look at that today, and we look at what goes on in what we call our educational system, it becomes very apparent to me that not do I think that the educational system that we have now is moving at a pace where it's not fulfilling its need. I think it is exactly fulfilling its need, especially for those of us who dwell in the bowels of society. So for the black man, woman, and child, when we look at what we learn from our curriculum, when we look at what we've learned from our, you know, the things that we use to raise our consciousness, we're talking museums, Black museums, we're talking African-American study programs, and then we're talking about cultural centers. If we're talking about these entities being able to raise our consciousness in tune with the formal curriculum that we have, then when we look to those who control these institutions, and another wise man once said, there's absolutely no mistake, or there's absolutely no mistake at all, that all the wrong people control our institutions. So having a new educational paradigm allows for us to be more critical about forming a curriculum. And I know that we don't have Sister Deborah here, but her brilliance in what we do every month, it shows to me that when we talk about a new educational paradigm, then we must have an education that infuses the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad without a question, because we know that there have been hundreds of years of social workers, social programs, and things that have attempted to connect us to our greatness. But they all seem to be driven by either those who control or those who are the puppeteers, who have created a cadre of those who will go along to get along. So the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, with the new educational paradigm under the leadership of the Most Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, where we are right now, Brother Troy, it's a universal cry of dissatisfaction. And it leaves us as the black man, woman, and child in a position where we're worse off now than perhaps we were during the nadir of American lynching. So in that particular thought, we have to have a group that is uncompromising and willing to make sure that what comes first is freedom, justice, and equality. If we can make sure that that's the impetus of our educational paradigm, then we will become a lot more attuned to some of the nuances. And then with sacrifice, and I have to be very clear, Brother Troy, we have to learn to sacrifice. I know that's a huge word that carries a lot of baggage, but when we talk about sacrifice, that means giving up something very precious for somebody you'll never meet. And when we look at this old adage, there's an old adage that I would like to forward. And no matter what you think about this population, but the adage reads, every Jew is responsible for the well-being of every other Jew. Now, I don't want to go into the idea of what will happen to this population because of their behavior. But if we look and adopt that particular thought without the idea of us looking for material culture to define us, then that is indeed sacrifice, because we've been taught the more successful we are, the more material culture we can hoard. So a new educational paradigm will allow for you to understand that when we talk about what's going on with Black Lives Matter, we need to understand that with Black Lives Matter, this is not anything new. This is still a cry to quell injustice. So a new educational paradigm has to tackle this thought head on, and it also has to be able to, as you said, produce a new group that will be, well, we understand the youngest is the most important. So a new group that will tie into their responsibility, which is indispensable, but they have to be able to understand that the years that have gone past and the things that we have used just don't add up to what we need to be right now.
Thank you, Brother Fred. And you know, that point, there's several things you said, but the point of just, you really hit me just reflecting on how you define sacrifice. You know, and typically I would have said, you know, to give up or to, you know, withhold something from yourself that you may want or desire. But I think that additional point that you added on, in terms of for someone that you may never see, someone that you don't know and that you may never see. That's a really big thing, you know, at least in my eyes, that, you know, that we have to be able to see beyond ourselves. One of the things that tied to me is, I believe it was Damon Dash, recently he made a comment, and he was talking about that if you just do things for your first name, then you're selfish. He said that he does what he does for his last name. And when he said that, he would express that he was doing what he does, not just for himself, but with the consideration and thinking of his future. And with that said, perfect timing. We have Brother Imam Sultan that just joined us. And we're going to go ahead and jump into the questions, just kind of to follow up with, we kind of began to just look at why the purpose of this show and what we hope to accomplish. And, you know, I really didn't mention something that we've been doing as we've gone through these shows. Is the first one we started off with Sister Deborah, who is an educator and a few other things. But one of the areas is education that she really focuses on, and Brother Fred is the same. And then we followed up with the second show where we brought in Dr. Ridgely, who is over the Ministry of Agriculture of the Nation of Islam and has a strong commitment to being able to feed our people. But when you look at that, in addition to that, you know, it was interesting finding out that even in his focus in farming, he has a strong and has had and continues to have a strong commitment to education. And then we followed up with Brother Torre Muhammad, who is a businessman, but also we found out that he was a former teacher at the Muhammad University of Islam. And our last guest, we had Brother Timothy Muhammad, who is a master computer scientist, but also an entrepreneur. And so we brought him in with the focus of science and technology. And today I just want to introduce our guest, Brother Imam Sultan Muhammad, who is the National Imam of the Nation of Islam, which that being assigned that title by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan really was a big step towards the increasing fulfillment of that which he has been assigned to do by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and ask Brother Imam to share a little bit about himself, and then we'll go ahead and jump into the discussion and with the questions. With that, I just want to let those who are on know that you should probably see a Q&A button, and if you click on that, if you've logged in from Google Plus, then you can ask questions and we'll get to those as well. So with that said, let's bring up Brother Imam Sultan. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, sir.
We always begin in the most holy name of Allah Most High, the Beneficent, the Merciful. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, without partner, and we further bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. And we, as have been blessed to be among those who have been chosen, brothers and sisters, by one to be raised here in the wilderness of North America, a people that have been completely erased, wiped clean. We've been raised by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who himself was raised by Master Fard Muhammad. So we thank Allah. We thank Allah and could not thank Allah enough for the light, life, guidance, and power that we have received in the coming of Master Fard Muhammad, the great Mahdi, and in the rising and the raising of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, a man who had less than a full 4th grade education, who then became won by the tutelage of a master, of one who we believe has the ability to exercise the power of God. This is the key. So our brother just asked me to give a little bit of an introduction of myself. I am a child, a product of the Nation of Islam. I was born at the height and peak of the growth of the nation, and praise be to Allah, have been privy to growing up in what is known as the world of the Nation of Islam. And when I say that, I mean as a young man, as a great-grandchild of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I remember those days when I was in school, and during our lunchtime we had full lunch made from scratch right there in our own kitchens, from food that was grown on our own farms, cans that were being opened that were canned by our own canneries and factories, fish for lunch that was shipped in from our own import and of fish, and the beautiful ability I remember of when school was out. You know, I could leave the class, I could leave the school and walk down the street without fear. And I just, even as I recall this now, when I say fear, I mean, you know, the fear that is put into us by our parents, particularly our mothers, of being cautious for our very lives in our own neighborhoods. And this is something that I had a taste of in public school at an older age. But as a youth, coming up in a completely independent institution, that institution was connected to a neighborhood. And in that neighborhood, we as a movement known as the Nation of Islam really had full control and full development of our blocks. So I would go after school to the local barber, which was owned by us, you know, and talk and sit with brothers and sisters who would teach me those kinds of talks that you would see in any of our communities, and in terms of the politics, the socioeconomic discussions that we see in our barbershops as communities, but on a higher level, on a level on which we were informed very deeply by the teaching that was given to us to help us pull up ourselves to establish our own ethos, our own world. Why am I mentioning all of these things? Because I didn't stop learning once I left the classroom as a student. I was learning when I was sitting under my uncles, you know, hearing them. You know, these were like my uncles. Many of them I didn't know weren't my blood uncles until I reached 13, 14 years old, you know. So those conversations where our youth are learning right now in the barbershops, learning right now in corner conversations after school. The learning process never ends. So I was blessed to come up in, I want to say, the pedagogy of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Master Father Muhammad on an institutional level that made me very firm and aware of self in a way that was independent and as a free thinker in a society that we are found in that has an established narrative for the black man and woman, that has an established narrative for the white supremacist structures that maintain their power over our colonized communities. So we have to, in simple fact, here colonize ourselves, you know, take back what's ours. And I mention that just as a short background of myself, because this is my experience growing up in the Nation of Islam, growing up with a national identity. One other point on this, just as a foundation for our discussion, is at that point, as products of independent schools and as products of communities that have a holistic educational development, self-improvement program for the development of our communities, we also have to prepare our children that are growing up in our new world to understand their role among our own. Because I can also recall there were many times that I felt as a foreigner among my own people because I was taught a foreign language, so-called foreign language, as a young man, because there were entrenched civilizational and cultural aspects that I was taught in my rearing and schooling. So there are aspects to our educational frameworks that we have to see are necessary in what is important in establishing a spiritual base for our educational frameworks that will allow us to be able to make those connections with the broader society, the broader world, our Christian brothers and sisters, those who have no particular religious persuasion at all. There must be an aspect of spirituality that allows us to maintain that human common denominator that's based in the need for the picture I just painted, a full society, full community, as we see with those immigrants that have come here from other countries, establishing Chinatown, you know, establishing Little Italy, you know, among the Europeans. You know, we see the Asians and the Latino communities able to do this because they have a strong cultural fabric. So I'll close in that introduction on this point. Just as your brother sitting before you, I've been blessed to, at a young age, in formative years, to be cultivated under independent education. And I believe that foundation has allowed me to have a perspective of not only the world I live in here in the West, in America, in Chicago, or specific colloquial, you know, circumstances, but as a world citizen, as an original man of this planet Earth, a different perspective and different perspectives that have allowed me to see the real role of humanity as stewards, as agents, as representatives of God on this planet. And the narrow education that I have been exposed to in public education and in university and college is very narrow. I mean, you have doctors coming out unable to, you know, I can perform open heart surgery, but I have no idea how to raise my son. I have the ability as a social scientist or researcher to find out the depth of cultural psychology around specific organizations and groups historically, but I have no connection or ability to guide the social culture of my own family. So there are aspects of human development that are lost in this process of batching, in this process of commercialization of education, and that idea, I believe, has been pervaded by the commercializing and ability for larger agendas that are dictating where our people are to go, where we should be dictating and in full control and full capacity of where we are going ourselves. And I believe that can be done by making sure we catch our children early in age to develop their self-identity as it relates to their ability to engage the world around them and seek deeper knowledge and guidance. So I hope, you know, I know I painted a picture more so externally, but I wanted to do it from a place of experience, coming up, you know, in a society that we, by the grace of Allah, have been able to establish an 86-year history, and I was blessed to be able to live in the womb of that history, and inshallah be a positive example of the product that our nation has been able, by the grace of Allah, to develop from, of course, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who is leading and teaching and guiding us now as a mercy and extension of what we had, so that we would not forget that which we've lost, and know that whatever it is that we have lost, we can gain again because we once had it. So I thank Allah for the invitation from our dear brother Troy, and this effort of a new educational paradigm to begin discussions on just that, changing the paradigm. You know, that short introduction was just to say I personally am thankful to Allah for being reared and being born into a paradigm that is a reflection of this overall holistic aspect of how the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was teaching us, not only as followers and believers, but as a demonstration of the reality of what we know as the Muslim program in living color,
Yes,
in
sir.
in time, so you could walk into it and feel it and see it and learn as you take the journey along with us, inshallah.
Yes. But thank you very, very much. And that what you presented was so very important because it tied, even though you weren't on, it tied right into what we were talking about and how, you know, many, as I began this, they had different feedback on how it would flow, and one of the individuals, I have to give him his props, Brother Philip, from Black Star Project in Chicago. And one of the things he said is, he said, well, what you're doing, it's important that you don't just include educators in it. And the reason why I bring that up is twofold, is of course because what I've tried to do is to bring the ministries and have different individuals who are looking at education from a lens in which they function in, be it in trade and commerce, be it in agriculture, because that if we don't have a new agricultural system, if we don't have a new way of doing business, then we can't create a new educational paradigm. That these things have to be interconnected, and we have to begin to see them more interconnected. And with that, the picture that you painted is so very important as we begin to the establishment of a new world.
That's right.
Because if we don't have a picture in our minds of what we're working for, then we become tired, we become weary, and we really lose sight on why we're doing what we're doing. So all praises are due to Allah for you having an experience, which I know at some point can be disheartening, in that you look at what you recall, you in the type of world and society that you lived in as a child, but then to live in this. But what it does in the value of you and those who have able to experience, then it's not just the picture that we have to imagine and paint in our minds, but you have that picture because you've experienced many aspects of it. I want to go ahead and jump into the first question, and although you've already answered it in many ways, but I just still want to just kind of point at it and touch on it. That first question is, what is the purpose of education?
Go ahead, beloved. Brother Fred, you want to start us off?
Well, actually, it's you, Brother Sultan.
Okay, my turn.
We asking questions, you get the answer.
Okay, I get it. Your brother. Okay, so I get to play double down. Okay, I got it. Praise be to Allah. The purpose of education. I shared actually with Brother Troy a quote from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I know it was maybe not enough time, but the purpose of education in that short excerpt I gave him, actually I'll go ahead and read from here. I want to give this from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He states, okay, actually first with a Quranic quote. It's important, inshallah, as we get ready to read this quote, for us to understand that the learning process begins before we're actually born, in the womb itself. You know, some would argue that it begins and is happening on a generational level. That education is something that is not just developed, you know, from the cradle to the grave, but from the inception of our gene pool, you know, and what we have developed over millennia. You know, there's fancy terms for it, you know, we've heard of, you know, epigenetics and things like this. But the bottom line is that the purpose of education, according to Allah, God, in the Quran, I believe is in essence captured in this ayah, this verse, and that is Surah 2, verse 164. And Allah says, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alternation of night and day, and the ships that run in the sea, with that which profits men, and the water that Allah sends down from the sky, then gives life therewith to the earth after its death, and spreads in it, the earth, all kinds of animals, and the changing of the winds and the clouds, made subservient between heavens and earth. There are surely signs for a people who understand. These signs are surely for a people who understand. So the signs, educationally, before we're able to read, we understand through our sensitivities. We understand through the demonstration of things. We understand through symbols and signs, shapes, colors. God, Allah, is speaking in this verse about reading those signs that He has put here, not just for us to study as signs, but that are what? Keyword, subservient. We, as we begin to learn of ourselves, begin to find out and are taught, not by our mothers, not by our fathers, but by God Himself, that we have a special purpose, not only as individuals, but as humanity. And that special purpose is to be the vicegerent, the custodian, the representative, or in the Arabic language we say the Khalifa, the inheritor of earth, of the heavens, all that is in both. So when God tells us in Scripture, as He does in the Quran as well as the Bible, that we are the vicegerents, the custodians, the vicegerents and custodians, that God has made everything subservient, the earth, all that it gives, the winds, what it provides. If we contemplate on this particular verse, we can alone see industry. We can see, as Allah says here, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alternation of the day and night, and the ships that run. He has taught us, Allah God, that we have ships, we have the ability to harness the natural world around us to serve our purposes for a greater purpose. It says, and the ships that run in the sea with that which profits men. So that's international commerce right there, shipping. So one should be, if he is contemplating the earth, the heavens, the seas, how is this able to support and sustain not just my life as an individual, but my family, my community, my nation, and the broader world? The alternation of night and day is speaking to what we see of what can be harnessed in the solar system through even solar powering. How do we harness these powers, this creation that was given to us to serve us? God says also the water that Allah sends down from the sky. This is pure water that gives what? Life therewith to the earth after death. This is also a beautiful symbology of the nourishment that is needed in the human life, the human being. That water that gives life to the dead of us, meaning those who are unable to produce because of what? A lack of knowledge. So God sends down, coming from above. Nothing spooky. That's the rain coming down. Meaning something from the higher plane of thought that is coming down and saturating those aspects of our basic human life that is needed, such as food, vegetation, and so forth. So Allah here is also giving us a picture of what? He says in the next portion of this, and spread in it all kinds of animals. Here's agriculture, and the changing of the winds. We've mentioned that the sun can be harnessed for electricity. The winds can be harnessed for electricity. The clouds made subservient. We are now able to, as human beings, scientists, those who are given and inherited this God power, God's power, God's representative. We are able to place chemicals in the sky and make clouds, So we have to look at education, as this verse points to. It's of the entire world, the entire earth being made subservient to the human being. Now, this verse ends saying, there are surely signs for a people who understand. So then is understanding. So we can study these symbols. We can view them as beings that are external from it and desire to extract from it, or we can view it as beings that are part of it and are able to exercise our power over it. Allah says in another place in the Quran, Sunurihim ayatina, we will soon show them our signs, fil afaqi wa fi anfusihim, in the horizons and in themselves, hatta yatabayyana lahum innahu al-haq, until it becomes clear to them the reality. So we must understand that the purpose of education is first to find an orientation to the microcosm of self, knowledge of self. And that connects us with the macrocosm, the knowledge of the world around us. So it's very important for us to understand this as those who are stewards of the planet Earth, given the blessing of the ability to exercise the power of God. This is the very purpose, is to know the world around us, and finally, not only know the world around us to exercise the fullest capacity and ability to subdue the earth, as the scripture says, but to subdue the earth with justice, with righteousness, in a way that we are spreading these resources to all, regardless of creed, class, color, that these are the innate aspects of rule that has been given to humanity, and these innate aspects that humanity has been blessed with must be tempered with freedom, justice, and equality.
Brother Sultan, thank you so very much for joining us, and I can never thank you enough for just your words as we tie them into our ultimate goal of answering these three questions. But I wanted to go back to something that you and I both experienced, and thanking you again for our time together, brother, as my brother, and I am indeed your brother, that you were able to bring students from MUI to a college setting.
Excellent.
And to have that, I think, as we talk theoretically And I think as we can have a very intelligent understanding and we can create paradigms which will indeed bring about a new world, I think it's more so important that we act these actions and bring them into educable moments.
Yes, sir.
So as a group, when I look at what we know as our education now and what it is to mean, I think about the words of the most honorable Louis Farrakhan when he talks about education and what we know as education being infinite. But the idea of what education can cause, we're talking about American education being infinite, but what education can cause should be consistently finite and
Yes.
never allow us to be bottled in. So when we speak of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and reading, writing, and arithmetic, as they would say back in the days, I think that what we have is a group of young people, our youngest is the most important, who are no longer looking to those old paradigms with a thought of it being consistent with helping them where they are today.
Mm-hmm.
Helping them, as you mentioned earlier, going from one corner to another corner and who they will encounter and how they will deal with these particular issues. So when we talk about education, I wanted to ask your thoughts on the practicality and how the rubber meets the road and how our youth will look at education when we attempt to change the paradigm and what should be used as we transform.
That is a key question, and it immediately brings to mind really something the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has said in relationship to new ideas. Actually, what you're saying is kind of touching on some of the challenge that I had coming up in an independent school system, and then being met with the quote so-called real world, right? Right. So we're able to develop as communities educational programs, systems, institutions. But if our experience, because the reality here is that life is an experiential journey, an educational journey that is experiential. And this ultimately is our course. And when we have lived our full course of life, you know, we've completed our study, God willing, uh, with the reward of a fruitful life that will take and extend our lives beyond the grave if we are in tune to this key point here. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad states in Our Savior Has Arrived, in regard to your question as a foundation, he states, he states this: how must the God of righteousness begin? What thought do you have of him and his beginning? He makes all things new. The first way to bring about something new is to change the way of thinking of the people. When you have removed from the people the old mind and idea, then you can insert new ideas into their minds. This is done by the old being attracted by a new way of teaching, a new school of learning, to condition their minds, to that thing that you are about to present to them. That is altogether new and different from what they have been accustomed to. This particular quote that appears in Our Savior Has Arrived, for me and many who are in the educational development within the Nation of Islam is very profound and used quite often. This idea, you said, how can we reach our youth? How can we bring them into something new? So the first thing, as we are taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in introducing a thought, is, he says here, the first way to bring about something new is to change the way of thinking. So this is the key, changing the way of thinking. Not necessarily did he say changing the educational system, but the way of thinking. So we're talking about how to think, critical thinking. We're talking about knowing self, the idea of Socratic knowledge. So changing the thinking of the people. And he says, when you have removed from the people the old mind and idea, then you can insert a new idea. So part of what we have to do, you know, coming up in the 90s, there was a film called The Drop Squad by our brother. I don't think he made the movie, but I think he put the movie out, 40 Acres and a Mule. I think Spike Lee had something to do with this movie. But the premise of the movie was that the Drop Squad would go around and snatch our brothers off the street that were being pulled in by the Chicken George mentality, going in for the ability to assimilate as black people and take on the mind of a people that desire to appropriate our reality, right? But taking these brothers off the street into a deprogramming and reprogramming process. So what I mentioned of my personal life was that, just that. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad showed us that resocialization is the answer. Resocialization. So we have to take our youth out of the world that they are in, that is bombarding them with these commands and messages that are not only deadening their mind through low-level vibrational information that is not educating, it's just information, and a society that is also teaching them a picture and vision of self that is inferior, based on a construct and ethos of a Christian world mindset that operates around what we understand to be the image of what is considered a white God in Christianity. This picture. There's a psychological effect to this that has not changed. This scientific test that has been done historically and done presently with children of color who are asked which one is the pretty doll and which one is the ugly doll, and they're given a range of dolls and complexion to choose from, and beauty is associated with light skin, light complexion, smart, good behavior is associated with lighter skin. So these are thoughts, and these thoughts form our behavior, form our culture, form a culture where we have heavy dropout rates in high school. And we have social scientists that study this and actually profit from it and build institutions where they can warehouse our people in prisons, in this prison industrial complex. But we don't have the authoritative social scientists with the power to study us in a way so that we can be empowered to profit from ourselves, profit from our own ability to produce as human beings that are contributing to the world as productive members of society. So one of the ways I believe we have to begin with our youth, in all reality, is completely re-socializing. I'm attempting to do the best I can with my children. They are in an independent school. It is called Muhammad University of Islam. They have after-school programs that they're involved with. They have grown up with a very, very nurtured worldview that is global and not limited to Western society. They by no means have any understanding of their history beginning with slavery. They're very clear, praise be to God, that their history begins with the creation of the heavens and the earth. Now, yet I have to take extra precautions. Although they are in a private school, independent school, with an independent curriculum, we are learning the second we walk out the door. As I mentioned, as a young man, I was still learning from barbershop, from the local convenience store. I was blessed that they were all ours, meaning the Nation of Islam at that time. But now our youth are leaving our independent schools and they're going to the Arab-owned store on the corner, where they will see alcohol. They will see, just at their height level for marketing purposes, as has been studied, marketing material that is prepping them to be drinking alcohol through these energy drinks, you know, cigarettes and so forth. Not to mention the level of profanity and immorality we see on these magazine covers and so forth that are being promoted. So, as I see it, once a child is introduced to a new idea, we then have to demonstrate that idea, at least on a small scale, where they can experience and develop from what that, for lack of a better term at the moment, that incubation will allow us to produce. And that requires wholehearted support of our families. So the learning cannot stop in the school. There has to also be a joint contract between the families of our youth and the educators in our systems of education. And just to add one little point, that contract, meaning the education extends home, and we should also explore leadership academies where our youth are able to go to, not military school per se, but types of leadership development institutions that are taking them outside of the world that they have been saturated in, so that that new idea that is being presented to them can have its fullest attraction without being bombarded by the pull and programming that we see in this society that is leading and contributing to the lowering of our capacity as a people and our moral standards, educational standards, and our overall worldview as it relates to education and its purpose.
Thank you, brother Imam Sultan. All praises are due to Allah, and you're really going in at what you know, the picture that I saw when we began this is that we have to really begin to relook at what the purpose of education is. You know, that's a very simple question, and you know, when posed, most would say, "Oh, that's, you know, why even ask such a simplistic question?" You know, but when we look at it and we look at what we see and we desire for the future, then the source of what we produce in the future is going to be based on what we put in the minds of our children.
That's right.
Minister Louis Farrakhan, and I may not have the quote exactly, but he says, "He who prescribes the diameter of your knowledge dictates the circumference of your activity."
That's
so
correct.
It's basically what they put into our minds is determining the reality in which we exist in. And you know, just to tie into that real quick is that you talked about this educational system and what it does. And Brother Fred, you mentioned this as well. And you know, one of the things that I began to do is to stop saying that this current education system is not successful, because the educational system in this society is 100% successful. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. And we need to begin to look at it that way, because that changes the position in which we're in. Because if we say that the educational system is not successful, it means that what it's doing is by accident. But if we look at it and say that it is 100% successful, that means that this is warfare.
Yes, sir.
And we have to begin to look at it as that. And that even tying in, just as you talked about the your educational experience, and you talked about how when you walked out of the building, you walked up to the street and went to a barber shop that was owned by people who looked like you. And not only was it owned by people who looked like you, they had the same interests.
That's right.
That you had. When you went up to the street to the grocery store, they had the same idea of what your future, what they wanted for your future. It was not just in their interest, it was for your interest. So when we look at this society, the educational system is 100% successful because it's part of a system. It's the system, and that system, we can dance around it, we can say it different ways, but it's white supremacy. And all the institutions in this society do exactly what they were designed to do, and that's to support the system. The system is able to continue to live because there's an educational system that supports it. As you mentioned earlier, there's a church that supports it. And, you know, it really is just interesting that the big thing that I think you're really bringing to this is that you're painting that picture of what our future should look like and letting us know that we've been there before.
Yes.
And we can do it again.
Indeed. I really would like to say that along with what Brother Troy, and I want to support what Brother Troy is saying, and I think what Brother Sultan has taught us today, and we can go right to the scripture where it reads, a reminder benefits the believer.
Yes.
When we as believers, and yes, we are all believers,
right,
in the greatness of our being through our what we call grand sisters, and we understand, and you being a living witness to that portion of life brings life, and it is indeed the water that nourishes our future. And I am very unapologetic about how our youth look at society from the lens and from their vantage point. And I'm very sensitive about what it is that it takes for them to have a different light. Mm-hmm. And it takes a stalwart example, something that they can tangibly touch.
That's
just
right.
Like they touch a video game, just like our young men touch AK-47s when they're upset and they want to espouse manhood. So this has to be not just a counter narrative, because that's not strong enough, but it has to remind us of a time where we understand wholeheartedly that our people are indeed the original man on the planet, and according to the most honorable Elijah Muhammad's teaching, the aboriginal man. And for us to become that original or aboriginal man, then indeed we need paradigms and examples that tie us back to our greatness. But they have to be able to encompass what's important with our youth. So you're talking about some very unique perspectives that have to be brought to the table, and they have to be brought to the table. And I've heard the Most Honorable Louis Farrakhan say on a number of occasions, you can't be no punk when you're talking to our youth. See, because the milquetoast part of it is what they don't respect. So you can't find them in school. You don't find them in church anymore. So we have to be able to be versatile enough to be disciplinarians, but not the old discipline in itself, in its totality. But it has to have the grounding and the foundations to be able to have them look at life in a different manner. So we're in a very precarious situation. And it's going to take a lot of our wholehearted fortitude and ingenuity. And I think that not only do I think, but I know that we're up for the task. But so very few of us understand that this has to come outside of academia. It has to come outside of a classroom. It has to come outside of the mosque. It has to come outside of our households. And we have to go to those who have been deemed the most at risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
And we're going over time, and I think that's okay. I don't want to go too much over time, but you answered, and I don't think we need to ask it because you already thoroughly answered it. What should we expect education to do for our people? You've torn that one up. So I want to jump to the last one, is what should be included in the curriculum to bring us back to what we have experienced in the past, but of course we want to move not just on what we have, but we want to move even further on. So what should be, if you can bring out some specific things, I know you've already touched on many of those as well, but if you can just give us a few specific things that needs to be in this curriculum so that we can get where we need to go.
Yes, sir. I believe one of the most critical aspects that we need in our curriculum first is, if we look at this verse that we began our discussion with from the Holy Quran, it was related and began with something that we consider or take for granted quite often, and that is basic astronomy. Astronomy. And we were taught, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has said, he's made this statement. He said, it's interesting that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said the whole scope of the teachings of Master Fard Muhammad is astronomy. Now, if we, I don't want to go too deep in our science of study as students, but we have something called student enrollment, and that student enrollment has 10 questions. And those 10 questions, according to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, are 10 questions that are based on the universe. The 10 questions are representative of the sun and the 9 planets. This is the beginning of our study, the very universe that we are in. So to exclude astronomy as part of the key sciences would do us a deep injustice for what is behind the science, behind the study of astronomy. We are then given actual facts that are to give us an orientation of the universe that we live in, which is preparing us for the rule of that universe. For if you don't know your topography, if you don't know the topography of the land that you are entrusted with the space that you are entrusted with, you cannot be a good landlord. So we must, by the grace of Allah, begin with astronomy, the sciences, mathematics, and very crucially, and I'll read this, and please bear with me. I know we're going a little bit over, but our brother hit a chord here with your brother who's a instructor of Arabic and Islamic civilizations at Muhammad University on a daily basis, and we bring this, praise be to Allah, through the post of Imam to the rest of the nation. But that is the key orientation. First, in self-knowledge, the Prophet, peace be upon him, Muhammad of 1400 years ago, said, he said the following words: "Man ya'rafu nafsuhu ya'rafu rabbuhu." He who knows himself knows his Lord, knows his God. So the knowledge of self is the first step. And the knowledge of self must also begin with the tone. You know, what is the tone of the self? What is the rate of my heartbeat? What is the universe in myself? As we quoted this verse earlier. سَنُورِهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ إِنَّهُ الْحَقُّ. Surely we will soon show him, he, all this human being, the signs in the horizons outside of you, right? فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ, and inside of you, until you see the reality, the truth of things. And this is the basis of knowledge. Now, there's a language in the symbols of the sun, moon, and stars. Allah is talking to us behind the wind as it blows, behind the tree as it is a symbol. It is a language. Our very body is a language. It's speaking to us when we have 5 fingers. What is it saying when we have 5 fingers? How does that relate to the universe? So knowledge of self, knowledge of God are core. But language is the storehouse of thought. Language is the storehouse of thought. We are taught that our original language is Arabic. Now, this is one of the things as a young man that made me feel, you know, as like I mentioned earlier, somewhat that I had to negotiate a couple identities growing up, you know, as in a civilization of established on a new paradigm among my own people. Oh, here's this brother, you know, he's eating something called bean pie. He don't mess with the pork, you know what I mean? And there's something a little different going on here. The brother, he's saying these words in a whole nother language. Where are you really from? Yeah, I know you say you're from the South Side, but where are you really from, man? You're speaking this Arabic. Are you one of them Arabs over there? What's going on? What's your history? No, Arabic is not a language of a particular culture or race. Arabic is the language of the Quran. And Arabic, we're taught, is our original language. Now, for those who may or may not ascribe to Islam as a label of self-identification, please do know that Arabic is not only the original language, meaning first language, and this can be proven in no limit of time, but it is also the oldest living language. It is the oldest living language. Why am I putting emphasis on this, particularly as we look at the development in our communities as black people? As we began to self-identify, our names changed. We started naming ourselves. You know, it may not have been Muslim, but we have brothers and sisters with the name Malik. You know, and if we didn't know Arabic, we would make something up. You know, no disrespect to whoever may be named Shaniqua, whoever may be named, whatever. But it was in rejection of that language that took us away from our origin. So we began to express ourselves by even re-identifying ourselves with names that were considered, quote, black names. And these names are rooted in Arabic, not or our indigenous languages from the continent. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said something in an excerpt that I shared. It may be able to be put up or not, but it was regarding the circle of our study as those who have been put on the path of study through student enrollment, and those who have heard the message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He states these words. He said, "You must remember," and this is from a Table Talk recording excerpt from 1973 October. He states, "You must remember robbing you of your language. It was robbing you of wisdom of self. You were being robbed of wisdom of self. If you could speak Arabic, you would learn more of self than you would in English, even though you were born in English or raised in English and not in Arabic. Since Arabic was your original language, that would lead you back to the original self. The original language does not stop in Europe." This is referring to this European westernized ethos of how the educational system is set up. This is my subtext here. I continue the quote. "Language does not stop in Europe. That's why you would learn more of knowledge of self, because that original language of yours, Arabic, leads you back east. And takes you into the presence of the original man of the East. How would you learn then? This is the first spot of our planet that started us into the knowledge of self, of our self-creation, of our self-construction of self, construction of a place on the earth for self." And he closes, or will close on this point. "You can't learn all about self in Europe." So we as black people here in the West, we cannot learn all about self with just a European paradigm. You have to come out of Europe, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says, and go where your kind was first originated. Then that's learning about self, about yourself. It is where self began. And I'll skip down here to close this out. This has been our length of discussion. It is the particular circle of self. The circle of self is what God wants us to do. Interesting, not to do, not know, but the circle of self is what God wants us to do. Get in the circle of self. Here is one, meaning himself, that is taught to teach you, that knows the circle. Not only did I give you a knowledge of yourself in the circle, but a knowledge of the circle. Thank you for bearing with me in that quote. But this quote, for me, is such a foundation as we talk about a new educational paradigm. It has to begin with language, new ideas in language that come from language. Now, Arabic itself, as the oldest living language, therefore has the largest lexicon than any other language. Now, what am I saying? We already actually know some Arabic. It's called the Arabic numerals. Arabic has been very impactful upon Western society. We already know some Arabic. It's called sugar. That is the Arabic word for sugar. Something that the European did not know how to do. Spice their food. Sugar, sukkar. The Arabic word for chemistry, alchemia. On and on. Embedded in what we call English are words such as algebra, and on and on and on. the sciences upon which this Western world built itself, impacted from the Renaissance, is rooted in mathematics, which is Islam, is rooted in the sciences of medicine that is rooted in Islam. Ibn Sina, one of the greatest compilers of medicinal remedies, comes from this history. So when we begin our language study, that language study also takes us out of a study of the world based upon the colonialist, imperialist narrative. I was blessed once I was raised and in and out of public school here and there, but mostly in private school education of Muhammad University of Islam schools. I was then transplanted overseas to learn or further my learning, because I began my learning of Arabic here at our own school, my father teaching me Arabic, how to read and write. But to deepen that knowledge, our family went overseas. Now here comes part of this resocialization aspect. And living overseas, I was exposed and actually skipped American history. Instead, we studied the history of what's known as the Khulafa, the growth and expansion of the world of Islam, which goes back over, really the study of this goes back at minimum 2,000 years, at minimum. And we began to study the development of civilization itself and how it bottled up and the European into the European lands through the Abbasid, the Ottoman, the Uthmanian dynasties. Eastern world history, which we don't get until we reach university level. By then, most of us don't get until we reach university level. By that point, your mind and matrix of thinking has been framed completely. Completely. To believe that the first man to do eye surgery had a European name. Absolutely false. You know, with a cursory study of world history and science, we will find that the major claims of scientists of the Western world are absolutely false. So it begins with the language, and that language is immersed in a culture and society that is supporting that development, and that language is also a language that is robust enough to express the fullest of what the human being can express. We've heard this phrase, there's no words to express. Maybe there is. We just don't know the Arabic word for it. So the Arabic, as I close that main point, linguists have said of Semitic languages, period, even if you learn Hebrew, that Arabic is a language that has linguistic expression that one could compare with this analogy. That English is a language that would limit you to painting in black and white, while Arabic or other Semitic languages are languages that will allow you to paint in color. There are literally thoughts that are unable to be expressed in a single Arabic word that would take you, a good 2-3 paragraphs to define. And it's like, oh, that's what it is. and you'll find, oh man, this is a feeling that I've had all my life but never had a word for it. So praise be to Allah. We have been guided also as a people, black people, and I leave it here with our history. Whether you see this path as a path of study or another path, we cannot negate the reality of our history. It is documented that nearly 40% of those who were stolen and robbed into slavery, subjugated and erased mentally, spiritually, were subdued by white supremacy as commodities and chattel slavery. That 40%, nearly 40%, were Muslims from Muslim lands that spoke Arabic, wrote Arabic. There's a man in history, we can look him up. His name is Abdurrahman Ibrahima, a man who found his way out of slavery during the time of slavery through his ability to read and write Arabic. He was able to reconnect with his motherland based upon that connection, based upon that ability to read and write his original language. So I know we have a time clock going, and our brother, I do apologize. You know, I do work as a one who, by the grace of Allah, has been put before others to speak, and I don't want to just keep running and speaking without reaching out to my brothers to engage in this conversation. So, but this is the key point: is language is extremely important. I know this was a long answer to those key things, but mathematics, language, arts, sciences, and technology are the basis of the study that we need. And at the root, what is in the center is the knowledge of self and God. God-centered education. God has been taken out of public school education completely. And without the knowledge of God, we have no ability to attain knowledge of self.
Thank you, Brother Imam Sultan. We are definitely going to have you on again. We begin to scratch the surface, but I can't thank you enough, because and everyone has done it in a different way, but I think you have really pulled a key component of this program together, and exactly what, you know, what I believe we have to do as it relates to education. I do want to thank Brother Jonathan. He put out a question. I'm going to have to see if I can snatch you at some point in time. I'm not, and it's a full one. So we're going to have to get you back on again, maybe on another sideshow. But thank you.
If you want, we could post the question, the answer to the question online. You know, you can send me the question and I'll post it to the brother today.
Yes, sir. But thank you again. But what I would like you to do is close on this, and we're going to close out with the a video of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. But if you could just tell us how can people get in contact with you? I heard you got a few products. You know, it's not just about money, but we do have to have finances to continue to do the work that we're doing. And I know you have some products that, you know, would benefit those who are interested in the teaching of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and with that, just are interested in benefiting themselves. So can you tell us a little bit how people can get in contact with you and reach out for you?
Absolutely. By the grace of Allah, we are in the midst of running a major research project known as Table Talks. The Table Talks project is an archival project of over 600 hours of audio recordings of the table conversations of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Yes, sir.
And it is something that is extremely important to not only the preservation of our history, but really extremely important to our necessity to have control over our personal narrative as a people, as families. So it is a reminder for me, as a great-grandchild of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, also of the necessity for us to have intergenerational means to share our family narratives, particularly as a people who have been cut off from our history. We must preserve with deep and critical vigor our history. And you can look into Table Talks at tabletalks.org. Again, it is an oral history project that is designed to open up the autobiography of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. It is to give more for those who are followers or those who study the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, insight to his teachings from many perspectives. There are many revelations and new discoveries in these recordings by the grace of Allah, and that is a long-term project. And you can order the first volume of what is now 6 hours of the 600. We've done about 10% that have been transcribed and put into a volume 1 edition, along with audio recordings to listen as you read. And again, that is just an example of what Table Talks is in volume 1, but it is an archive of 600 plus hours of real-time conversation with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, dignitaries that he met and sat with at his home, as well as his top laborers and advisors. And lastly, and very critically, is that assignment that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has placed by the grace of Allah for me to do my best in achieving, and that is the educational development of our community around the Islamic practices. So you can also find publications, educational publications at islamicsciences.noi.org, islamicsciences.noi.org. This is where you can find publications on how to learn basic Arabic, the prayer of the Muslim, as well as Quranic educational materials. And again, that is islamicsciences.noi.org and tabletalks.org. And inshallah, we continue our conversations in occasional but yet semi-regular articles in the Final Call. And you can see how to order and so forth in your current edition of Final Call.
Thank you once again, Brother Imam Sultan, and of course my co-host, Brother Fred, soon to be Dr. Fred. But we're going to go ahead and close out as we always do. Thank you, and look forward to those questions. You can go and visit Brother Imam Sultan on Facebook as well as Twitter, and I'll post this information on my Facebook site as well as Twitter, where you probably got this from. Once again, assalamu alaikum, and look forward to seeing you on the next show.
Thank you, Brother Sultan.
Thank you, Brother Fred, again, also for that beautiful opportunity for our youth to come to sit in your class. It's what it's all about. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. All praise due to Allah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, sir.
about math and talking about a new curriculum. Don't worry about math and science and all of that. First, worry about giving them the right attitude and mind to achieve the curriculum that you have for them.